Why, hello there, everyone. I just finished watching Gundam The Witch from Mercury episode 3, and wow, that is definitely my favorite episode so far, which I would have watched on Sunday night / early Monday morning after the Sunday live stream, because I always stream on Sunday, and Witch from Mercury gets its new episodes on Sundays, and since my voice is warmed up after streaming, it's always a convenient time for me to just watch the episode and review it right after the live stream. But this week was also preoccupied with a closed beta test, just like last week, because last week it was the Street Fighter 6 beta test, and this week it was the Warhammer 40k Darktide beta test. And I wanted to play as much of that as possible, so I stayed up really late streaming that. It was like a 9-hour stream or something like that. So I just decided to watch and review the episode the next day. But I did, in fact, watch the video or watch the episode without getting spoiled. So success. Anyway, this episode opens up with, this might not be a surprise to most people, right? I'm assuming most people are like, yeah, we know that the shark clone was Suetta's mother. But if you watched my last episode review, you'll know that I was kind of actually on the fence about believing that the shark clone was Suetta's mother. Not because it wasn't obvious, but because it was so obvious, it was so painfully obvious, it made me a little suspicious. It made me feel as if maybe they were trying to trick the audience into believing that it was Suetta's mother. But no, there were actually no tricks, because they literally show it at the start of this episode that it is literally her mom. They even show her without the mask, right? And they show the mask sitting on the desk out of frame where Suetta can't see it when she is talking to her mother, right? So I just had to bring that up because some people are probably thinking I'm crazy for not actually believing 100% that it was her mom. But I see now that it is, in fact, her mom. It is weird, though, that her hair is a different color, because the only reason I would imagine her hair being a different color is if the creators really were trying to trick the audience. Because maybe if they weren't going to reveal that it was her mother, right? Let's say they were going to make it less obvious and it was supposed to actually be a plot twist that they would reveal later. In that case, they could have used the different hair color as a way to mislead the audience into believing that it couldn't be her mother, right? But they did reveal that it's her mother immediately, so I don't know what the whole point of her hair color change is. So let me know if you guys have any ideas in the comments, because that is definitely a little weird. But enough of Suetta's mom, right? Because this episode was mostly about Guel. This whole episode was focused on Guel Jeddirk and developing him, and doing so in this duel, basically a rematch between Guel and Suetta, right? And I actually am relieved that the handling of Guel Jeddirk's character was really well done in this, and that's actually why it's my favorite episode so far, because if you watched my episode 1 review, you'll know that one of my few critiques was that he was handled really cartoonishly. For some reason, in episode 1, Guel is a very cartoonishly bad guy, which is really weird in Gundam. It sticks out big time in Gundam, because Gundam, the whole point of Gundam is that it was a deconstruction of the super robot genre, right? I'm sure most of you guys know this. Super robot genres, they have one-dimensional bad guys, right? I'm not saying there's no place in fiction for one-dimensional pure evil bad guys, right? I definitely like those types of characters too, but they serve a different purpose, right? The whole point of Gundam was them saying, what if we put actual multifaceted, multidimensional humans that are neither inherently good nor bad on both sides of a conflict, right? And Gundam's pretty much always been about that. So it would seem really weird and out of place and kind of like a downgrade if you just had this weirdly cartoony, mustache-twirling villain in a show that's supposed to be otherwise serious, right? I'm talking about Witch from Mercury. At least I'm assuming it's supposed to be serious, right? Literally, the second half of the whole show could just be a comedy. It could be an inverse Double Zeta, right? But I don't see that happening. I get the sense that they're trying to make this one of the serious Gundam shows, right? So, based on how cartoony Guel Jeddirk was in episode 1, I could have easily seen them doing a really weirdly fast and unrealistic 180 with him, right? They could have done a thing where, they could have done a thing in which if they were copying cartoons or something, poorly written cartoons, they could have been nice to the bad guy, and then the bad guy would make a complete 180 and become nice just because the good guys were nice to him, right? I was a little worried about that. Low-key I was. But it's actually good. And I'll get back to that when I start talking about the ending of the duel, right? Because that's when it becomes apparent how they are trying to use his character in the show. That's when it becomes apparent what kind of archetype he's supposed to be. So the episode starts out with Yule getting slapped, of course. This is actually the third time he's been slapped. So far he's been slapped once per episode. So let's see if we can keep that streak up. So maybe we should start keeping track of this. Anyway, because this whole episode is about the duel, obviously there's a setup for the duel. And I actually really liked the part in which Suletta and Yule are having to officialize the duel, for lack of a better term, right? They go to the dueling committee and they basically have to shake hands and agree on the duel, because they didn't really get to do that last time, because last time it sort of became an unorthodox situation, which is why they might have had grounds to null the results of that duel anyway, right? But in this case, it was a full-on official duel, and they were doing everything officially, so that way this could replace the results of the last duel, right? But I really liked the part when that other dueling committee member was laughing at Yule, right? She was mocking Yule. I actually really liked the part when Suletta defended him for not running away, right? Because I think she was one of the few people that actually kind of understood the position he was in, right? Having to go back to the duel and having to kind of swallow his pride to fight again after she so clearly beat him, right? Whereas a lot of the other people, right, the people that are probably used to being around Yule just see him as being in an embarrassing position, right? And just seeing him negatively for that, Suletta actually saw him in that embarrassing position and actually kind of saw something respectable in that, which was kind of the first sign of things that would happen throughout the episode. So I actually really liked that she respected her opponent enough to defend him in that sense, right? Kind of reminded me of, obviously this is some kind of trope. Well, it's not really a trope, it's just a character archetype, I guess. But it reminded me of something from Vinland Saga, when Thorkel is dueling the main character, Thorfinn. And that was one of my favorite parts from Vinland Saga because of the same reason. And then they talk outside, and that's where Suletta shares that saying with him that she heard from her mother. And it comes up that she heard it from her mother, which reminds Yule about the whole situation he's in with his dad and the weird expectations that are being imposed onto him. And I think that's actually the first moment. I don't think Yule realized it at this point, but I think that was actually the first moment that Yule started to be affected by Suletta in the same way that Miorine was affected by Suletta, in that both Miorine and Yule, well, Miorine already sees Suletta as her way out of there psychologically, like I said in the last episode review. But I think this is where, I think you could probably trace it to this point. That's when Yule starts to see Suletta as his way out of this whole situation. Metaphorically, at least, right? Because of him being stuck in this situation with his dad, just like how Miorine is stuck in the situation with her dad. Also, I think the show is going to end up having a lot of themes about parents, and maybe all the characters are going to turn patricidal at the end, right? Maybe that's what it's leading up to. But the fact that the resident shark clone is Suletta's mother, I'm thinking once that's revealed to Suletta, like once Suletta finds out that her mother is this villain or some kind of anti-villain or anti-hero or something like that, and once Suletta's already teamed up with Miorine and Yule, because it seems that that's going to be the main dynamic, right? The main trio, Suletta, Miorine, and Yule. It's going to be a team of 3 kids who are basically having to fight their parents, since all of their parents are these villains, right? I think that's where the show is going to end up going. But anyways, back to the actual episode and not just theory crafting. They then do the duel, right, obviously, and I think this is actually characterizing Yule really well. I really like the types of characters that are lawful evil. I wouldn't really consider Yule an evil character at all, but I'm just saying this for lack of a better term. The lawful evil characters that want meaning in their fights, right? Like, they don't just want the victory handed to them. They want it to actually mean something, right? I think the main archetype I can think of in my mind would be Virgil from Devil May Cry, right? He wants the fights to actually mean something. He wouldn't fight Dante when Dante's weakened because he wants to prove something, right? It's about the principle with these characters. And so the mobile suit that Yule is being given has some kind of AI system in it that's obviously going to help him quite a bit and do a bunch of things automatically, which Yule is not a fan of, right? Because he wants to be the one to beat her, right? He wants to redeem himself after what happened last time, but his father is accusing him of being childish because it's not about proving a point. It's about just getting things done, right? Which is really messed up because he's saying that not cheating would be the childish way to do it. But Yule basically just deals with it and does it anyway, right? He even realizes it as he's fighting Suletta in the duel that a lot of the joysticks are just moving on their own. It's like you think you're playing a game and then you realize you're not actually playing the game, right? But he just deals with it, and then it starts raining, which the viewers obviously know is his dad's doing, trying to essentially cheat, right? Because beam weaponry doesn't... I don't know if it did this in rain in other Gundam shows, but in other Gundam shows, beam weaponry lost its efficacy. It was less efficient when underwater, right? So I guess in this continuity, that is also true when it's raining. Considering how ineffective it was in the rain, I can only imagine how ineffective it is underwater in this case, because even in UC Gundam, even though the beam weaponry was less effective in water, you could still use it. It's just that the range and the power was significantly reduced, right? But in this case, it was almost just completely unusable in the rain. So I wonder if it even works at all underwater. Maybe we'll be able to see that later in the show. But this kind of gets Yule's hopes back up, right? He's kind of sulking. He's not really sulking. He's just really conflicted and angry about how his father doesn't trust him, right? Doesn't trust him to win this duel because he sees that the AI is doing most of the work. But the rain gets his mind off of it, and he just gets excited because he thinks that it's just luck being on his side, right? And him being able to capitalize, I think him thinking that he could capitalize on the luck would be his way of winning regardless of the AI, right? Like, if he could win so hard that he is convinced that he would have won with or without the AI, I think he would have been fine, right? But then, once he realizes that the rain was his father's doing, was in fact his father's doing, after Miorine stopped it, that's just when he gets completely crushed, right? Because he wasn't being trusted at all to win the fight. And this is a really good way to write a fight scene, right? I think this is a good case study of a fight scene because obviously you have the literal fight that's going on between the Ariel and whatever the heck his mobile suit was named. But you also have this other conflict going on within Yule, right? This conflict between himself and his father. But there's also a bit of inner conflict in there as well at the same time. But then you also have the dramatic irony of him not knowing at first that the rain was his father's doing, and Suletta not being aware of this conflict that's going on at all. So it's just really well written. Also, I really liked the music cues, the sound design too. The music and the sound design during that fight was so good. I know a lot of people were talking up the music in the duel in the first episode, but it was so short, and there wasn't really any kind of build-up. There weren't... I mean, obviously there were stakes, right? But I think as a viewer, there wasn't really much to look forward to in that fight. It just happened and it looked really cool and it set up the rest of the episodes, right? But in this case, these episodes, or this episode, episode 3, actually had some stakes that the audience was involved in, had some stakes that the audience was invested in, I should say, at this point. So this duel was automatically leagues better than the duel in episode 1, as it should be, right? Because this is the rematch. And, also, I should have said this. I have notes here. I'm kind of skipping around. I skipped this one. I have a note talking about how I liked at the beginning of the duel, right? Before they actually started, they had to recite the dueling vows. I thought it was pretty endearing how Yule sort of helped Suletta remember the vow because they were supposed to recite the vows, right? And Suletta was having trouble remembering it. And obviously, Yule there was looking really impatient. he has a lot of conflicted feelings right now. And you could tell he's just impatiently hearing her stumble through the vows. And then he starts saying it at the same time she's saying it. And so on one hand, obviously he's doing that so he can get it over with quickly, because it's probably really annoying to him to hear her go through it so painfully slowly. But also, I like to think in a way that he's helping her go through it, right? So I actually thought that part was kind of endearing and multifaceted. And then also, does anyone else think that the beam sabers coming out of the arms of Guel Jedric's mobile suit, after the hands are missing, the beam sabers that just come out of the arms with the missing hands, did that remind anyone else of the heavy arms from Wing? Because Gundam Heavy Arms has a hidden beam saber in the arms. I know it's not supposed to be a reference or anything, it just made me think of that. But while Guel did lose the duel technically, he lost the actual surface level physical fight, he actually won the conflict that was going on in his own mind, right? He won the personal conflict, which was much more important to him than some stupid duel, which obviously his father doesn't realize, right? So Suletta won her duel, Suletta won her conflict, and Guel also won his conflict at the same time. So really neither of them lost in this situation, because Guel smashed the AI system, right? And him breaking that AI system is kind of reflective. It's kind of a microcosm of him kind of breaking out of his father's imposed will on him, right? Literally breaking the glass. It seemed strangely easy to break the AI just by punching that monitor, right? But obviously they had to show some kind of visual metaphor of him breaking out of this prison that he's essentially been put in by his father, right? And it was a great conclusion to the fight. Like I said, Guel won his conflict and Suletta won hers. And I honestly think that the only reason he was inspired to do that is because of Suletta's influence, right? So Suletta basically has come there and she is completely threatening the status quo. And I think not only is she going to get Miorine and Guel, but along the way she might start kind of recruiting others to her side. Maybe not literally like people that hang out with her, but just people that support what it is she's doing, right? And that's going to really threaten the status quo and threaten these people in the Benerit group, right? And like I said, I think that's another reason why my prediction is that this whole show is going to maybe turn patricidal. I don't think Suletta necessarily wants to kill anyone right now, but knowing Gundam, it's probably going to get more dark later, and I think it's eventually going to have a lot of themes about, well, it already does have themes about parents and their children, right? But I think it's going to become even more extreme, and it's just going to end up having all of these patricidal fights later on. So that's my prediction. Like I said, this was my favorite episode so far. I really like what they did with Guel. And then, obviously, they did the completely, maybe some people would say out of nowhere, but I don't think it really was out of nowhere. Guel proposing to Suletta. It's so funny because literally the last duel Suletta did, she just became someone's fiance without her knowing or her consent, right? And then, in this case, she gets proposed to immediately after winning. But if you think about it, Guel is kind of an immature character because he's been spoiled by his father this whole time, right? He's been the head of this dueling committee for presumably a long time, and so he's always kind of gotten what he wanted on a surface level, right? But I honestly think that Suletta criticizing that one dueling committee member for laughing at him and asking her to stop laughing at him, and Suletta actually giving Guel a compliment at the end of the duel. I think that's the first time Guel has had someone else honestly respect him, right? He's probably been able to evoke a lot of fear from people up to this point, right? Obviously not his father, because he pretty much just has to do whatever his father says. But in terms of like the other students and the other people he has dueled up to this point, he's probably managed to get compliance or fear out of other people. But I think this is the first time he's actually been respected by someone else. And I think as soon as he got that from Suletta, he immediately realized that that is something he wants way more than anything else, right? And again, I think that's the reason why he was so receptive to Suletta's influence. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen on the next episode, because obviously, Guel's father is going to be really mad at him. But I think now that Guel has really made up his mind about what he wants to do in this situation, I don't think he's going to let himself get pushed around by his father anymore in the next episode, right? Like I said, I think him smashing the AI system was sort of a visual metaphor, a pretty effective one at that. So let me know what you guys think. I'm going to actually try to get the next episode up on the same day it comes out. I'll have to see the actual time these episodes get posted, right? Because I've known that they get posted on Sunday, right? I keep seeing people say Suetta Sunday on Twitter, but I need to see exactly what time it gets posted, because potentially if it gets posted earlier than I was expecting, if the new episodes are getting posted earlier than I've been thinking, then potentially I could actually watch them on Saturday night, like late Saturday night / Sunday morning, and then in that case I could actually post these episode reviews a day earlier, right? And obviously that's valuable because on YouTube, the timing of things is important. So anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and be sure to share any thoughts that you have in the comments, and I will see you all later. So bye for now.